What's up, everybody? I am your host, a teenage girl who has psychic dreams, and that is my co-host, a former child murderer who is back from the dead with a fresh case of frostbite. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we talk about our favorite movie from last year and one of the most anticipated sequels, Scott Derrickson's Black Phone 2. So this was at the top of both of our lists a few weeks ago, and I think that we were both thinking the same thing. We've got to do a deep dive on this one because the first one that we did, it just made that movie like so much better on a rewatch.
Yeah. I'm so glad we seen this right after we did a
I
deep
agree.
dive. It made this movie so much better because of certain references and lines and stuff that they took directly from the first one. Had I not just did a deep dive on it and hadn't watched the first one recently when we went to see this, I don't think it would have hit nearly as hard.
I agree.
I remember covering the first one and there being things that I hadn't remembered when we covered that, and, it had only been a couple years since I'd seen it. So, yeah, I think it definitely helped. It actually hit me when I was in there watching this. A fucking Blumhouse movie ended up
I
being both
know.
of our number 1 movies for the year.
It's funny. I thought about that very same thing while writing this episode. How in the world did that happen?
Yeah, Scott Derrickson and Robert Cargill,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
They put definitely between Sinister, Black Phone, and Black Phone 2, they know how to make a fucking horror movie. They know how to make a awesome feeling horror movie. They know how to use Super 8, and they can write some damn good fucking stories.
I've thought about it a bunch too, and I still can't decide which movie I like better. They're both so different. I'm definitely leaning towards this one though, because it's so much more creepier and just more fun to watch. The first one's great, but this one's kind of a more of a roller coaster ride, I think.
Yeah, I actually put it in my ratings, but yeah, I think this one is the better movie. It's the rare case of a sequel outdoing a really, really good first movie. But they feel so much different, and where I give this one the tiebreaker is just how dark and scary this one is.
Yeah. There's so much stuff I am ready to talk about, and I got a very interesting theory I developed while looking deep into this thing that I cannot wait to share.
Ah,
Very excited to get to that. And it's not going to be at the very end. It's, about 60-70% through the episode, but I can't wait to bring it up.
well, I hit a bit of a theory myself and actually moved it to the back. It was about 60 or 70% of the way through, and I actually copy and pasted it to the back. So that's kind of interesting. Interested to see where your theory is.
Yeah, definitely. So with that being said, are you ready to dive into the Black Phone 2?
I am.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want us to start having Super 8 dreams where people get hacked to death, give us a review. Black Phone 2 is a 2025 American supernatural horror film directed by Scott Derrickson and written by Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill, which, if you don't know, wrote and directed the first one. The film stars Mason Thames, Madeline McGraw, Jeremy Davies, and Ethan Hawke, who reprises his role as the Grabber. The story sees siblings Finney and Gwen, along with their friend Ernesto, head to a winter youth camp to uncover a mystery regarding the first victims of the Grabber, whose ghostly presence now haunts the camp. It was produced by Blumhouse Productions and Crooked Highway in association with Universal Pictures. It had a budget of $30 million and a box office of $132 million. Goddamn, they made $100 million off this bad boy.
Yeah, honestly, that's surprising because I feel like it wasn't talked about enough.
Well, people went and seen it, that's for sure. So, when Derrickson originally made The Black Phone, he had no plans to make a sequel. That is, until Joe Hill, who came up with the original idea when writing his book 20th Century Ghosts, called him up one day with a very simple idea. What if the Grabber called Finney from hell? And after the success of the first movie, plus this interesting idea Hill mentioned, he decided to sit down with his writing partner Cargill and brainstorm a story that would eventually become The Black Phone 2. Another interesting thing about this, too, is according to Hill, his own inspiration for the sequel was based on the iconic imagery of the Grabber's mask. Because as we see in this film, the mask looks even scarier and nightmarish than in the original movie.
Yeah.
The mask is
Oh,
a
God.
big improvement. The mask wasn't bad in the first one, but it's fucking awesome in this one.
Yeah, what made the mask so great in the first one was how they used the dynamics of being able to take the mask apart and wear it in different ways. And they took that and just really improved upon it and just they took that idea and made it scary as fuck.
Yeah, agree. So, of course, when they took this idea to Jason Blum, he was instantly stoked, probably because he saw dollar signs. And if you've been paying attention to Blumhouse lately, you would know that they're in a bit of a financial decline. So this movie definitely saved them a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, he's lucky he's got these two
Yeah.
making movies because they did Sinister for him, like, when Blumhouse wasn't awful.
Yeah.
They were still making good movies, so, yeah, these two guys are the Mike Flanagan
Of
of
Blumhouse?
Blumhouse,
Yeah.
yeah.
So once the T's were crossed and the I's dotted, pre-production got rolling, and in November of 2023, it was announced that Ethan Hawke, Mason Thames, Madeline McGraw, and Jeremy Davies would be reprising their roles from the first film, with Madeline McGraw taking a more main character role this time around. Much like the first film, Derrickson set out to include some important aspects of his childhood growing up in Colorado, noting that this time around the bulk of the film would be taking place at a Christian summer camp, similar to the one Derrickson attended in his youth. With this in mind, the production team set out in search for a camp that still resembles structures from the early to mid-'80s, prompting location scouts to visit 8 different summer camps in Ontario, Canada, and one of the main reasons it had to be in Canada was because the story takes place in a very deep snowstorm, which all the snow in the movie was real. It actually snowed way too much, forcing the shoot to last a little bit longer than they had planned.
It's funny because they almost canceled the shoot because of there being no snow,
Yeah,
which was, like, apparently for this area, almost unheard of. And then they just got so much snow that it, like, completely fucked up their shooting schedule, and they had to shoot certain scenes out of order than what they planned, and yeah, it all came together, though.
Yeah, it
Made a
did.
damn good movie.
And it's crazy that they attempted this because shooting in actual snow, very difficult, very time consuming, and very expensive.
Yeah,
And they were dead set on it being real fucking snow.
let alone, like, shooting it your entire movie
Yeah.
in snow. Like, this is so much snow that you can't fake this snow.
Yeah. So they ended up finding the perfect camp right outside of a town named Hamilton, located in Ontario, where they ended up doing very little set dressing except for the phone booth and all of the graffiti in the cabins. The graffiti was actually something that stuck out in Derrickson's head from when he attended camp, and he really wanted it in the film to add a bit of realism. I love the graffiti. Good
Yeah.
touch. Now, the lake in the film did actually exist at the real camp, but for the scenes that actually included the characters on the ice, they built a huge replica on a soundstage, along with a big and small tank full of water, gravel, and props for the underwater scenes.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on this. I didn't know if you were gonna hit this yet. I don't know if you got time to dive into the special features, but this lake is fucking incredible. And when they did the lake, he was like, in order for this to work, I don't remember if it was Robert Cargill or Scott Derrickson, but they were like, in order for this to work, we cannot use CGI backgrounds. So what they did is they actually went and took actual photos of the edge of the lake, of the boulders in the mountain in the trees on the edge of the lake, and they actually rebuilt those in studio. So what you see behind them, like, especially at the final nighttime scene, none of that's real rock or trees,
Yeah. Yeah, all built, all a replica of the real version.
and it was massive.
Yep.
Like, it was, like, built in a sound stage that was the size of, like, a massive airplane hangar. This thing looked like it was, like, 70% of a football field. Like, it was huge.
Yeah, watching all the special features, I really appreciated them trying to use as little CGI as possible. And a lot of that made their job a lot harder. They could have got away with a lot more of an easier time using a lot of CGI, but they really tried to not do that. And that is appreciated.
And it makes the movie have such a unique feel because they didn't have to shoot it in a way that hid a lot of that stuff, and it makes that whole, like, nighttime, the climax sequence so much better, and just the idea, like, they show somebody painting the lines on the ice, and it almost looks like they're using, like, a chalk for it, and it's just mind-blowing that that entire thing was done by hand.
So, filming began on November 4th of 2024 and concluded on January 23rd of 2025. And just like the last film, we get a ton of creepy Super 8 footage, which had absolutely no digital effects added in. So, scenes involving no sound used real Super 8 proper cartridges, and scenes with sound used Super 16 millimeter, which were then cut in half to be 8 millimeter, meaning the stuff shot on Super 16 were framed with half of the image and then expanded, giving even more of this grainy, old school look. Another cool thing with this, too, not just the Super 8 stuff, but all the filming, they actually went back and looked at how directors framed, lighted, and shot movies in the 80s and applied that to this film.
Yeah.
So everything they did concerning the filming of the movie are all like top-notch choices.
Yeah, these 2 guys do timepieces incredibly well, and, they talked about getting the cars and the items and stuff and the buildings and the feel of everything right, but to take that and then go watch movies of that time and to shoot it in a way that they wouldn't normally shoot a movie, it's just they went above and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, as a generation who grew up watching 'em, 80s horror movies, this was awesome. This was really cool.
It's almost like it at that point, it's an art. I mean, I know, like, all film is art, but it is, like, legitimately art. Like, I know a lot of these, especially, like, Blumhouse movies, are very
Generically
basic,
shot, yeah.
generic, super clean digital footage, and when you get 2 guys who love movies so much that they put so much into it down to the way they're gonna shoot the movie based off of the time that it takes place in to replicate those '80s movies. There really is It reminds me of Ty West in the way he did the
X, yeah.
X X,
The X trilogy.
the Pearl
Yeah.
trilogy, yeah. Like, at that point, it becomes an art.
So once the film was done, it premiered at Fantastic Fest on September 20th of 2025 with a pretty favorable review, with many attendees drawing comparisons of the film to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, specifically between the Grabber and Freddy Krueger. It was then released worldwide on October 17th, just in time for the Halloween season, bringing in 27.3 million on its opening weekend, taking the number one spot and finishing out with a worldwide total of 132 million. In October of 2025, Derrickson stated that he would only develop a third film if the story can be better than the previous two installments, expressing that he wants the series to be quality over quantity. Cargill acknowledged the potential for another film, but echoed Derrickson's thoughts by stating that they would only start production if the creatives could develop a story that is worthy of realizing. Hawk expressed interest in reprising his villainous role in a sequel, stating that he would like to explore the background of the story of the Grabber, his journey into hell, and his continued hauntings of other characters. And finally, Hill stated that he foresees the potential for various sequels, but acknowledged that their reality depends on the financial success of Black Phone 2. I've went back and forth this past week of if I want another one of these movies, and I don't know if I do.
Well, that's how I felt, if you would ask me after the first one. Like, that story really felt like a one and done. Didn't seem like that there was anywhere to go with that except a prequel, and they completely went in a different direction. I would have never thought going this route for the Grabber, which seems kinda obvious now, but you remember when the news dropped, like, people were talking about this sounds like a Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, and, you know, how is this gonna work? This is gonna be a nightmare, and I thought that this was the perfect sequel. Like, they continued the great story. They answered questions that weren't even necessarily questions after the first one, but they really answered a lot of, background stuff that you don't really get much info on, and then did it in such a way that it feels like a completely different movie, but it meshes so well with the first two. It's weird.
Well, that's my problem with the third one is I feel like the second one full circled everything and it answered all the questions that the first one did leave. And I don't know if there's any room for a good story, at least with these characters. Like I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I guess if it was Derrickson and Cargill still doing it, then I would be a lot more open-minded about it, but if it's anybody else but them, no. I don't want it to happen.
Yeah, I it has to be them. I don't think that Blumhouse would necessarily have anybody else even do that, or if they could legally, I feel like those 2 might own the story, but yeah, I don't necessarily want a 3rd one because the first 2 are so good. I don't want them tainted,
Yep, same.
but if those 2 felt like they had a story for it, I would trust them.
All right, so ratings, Rotten Tom, 71%. Pretty high. IMDb gave it a 6.1 out of 10, Letterboxd a 3.1 out of 5, and there's no Google average audience rating. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it for rent on Fandango, Google Play, Apple TV, and Amazon Prime for $5.99. This is a very new movie, so it's not readily available to just stream.
No, but it's good enough to go out and buy.
Oh, 100%. All right, so you ready to dive into the plot of The Black Phone 2?
I am.
All right, so we open the film up with a young woman named Hope in a phone booth dialing an old black phone located on the outside of Alpine Lake at a camp for kids and teenagers. And we see that the year is 1957, so about 21 years before the events of the first film. And pretty much immediately we can tell that someone picked up the other line, but unfortunately, we can only hear Hope's side of the conversation, and it becomes clear that she has no idea who this other person is. After a brief introduction, Hope then tells this person that she keeps having this dream where she sees the same 7 numbers carved in ice, and she has finally decided to dial them. And we don't hear the response to this, but Hope's reaction tells us that this other person not only believes what she is saying, but also understands what she is talking about, leading Hope to get very excited and begin to demand to know who she is talking to. But before they can give her any answers, the phone line starts buzzing, leading to the sudden end to the call. We then see a concerned and confused Hope walk away from the phone booth when suddenly the screen turns white and we cut to the title card and intro. I like the imagery of the intro. It's got some good stuff. But man, for me, it's the music and unsettling sounds.
Yeah.
That's what sets the intro off for me.
Yeah, this movie actually has a pretty good score. They do well on that, but yeah, I do love the creepy opening.
Yeah.
Like the imagery, it has a certain art style to it that just fits, man. It works really well.
So after that, we immediately cut back to the school from the first film, but this time it is 1982, which is 4 years after Finney killed the grabber, and we quickly see that some things have changed, especially with Finney, because he is currently beating the shit out of another student while a circle of excited kids chant fight, much like we've seen in the last movie. His sister Gwen sees this and runs over, putting an end to the fight, with Finney finishing him off with a couple more devastating hits to the face before walking off. Once Gwen catches up, she proceeds to ask Finn what happened, and he tells her that this new kid called him out for killing a serial killer but not really looking very tough. She then asks him if he actually needed to beat the kid that badly, and he responds with a familiar line, "In a situation like that, the more blood the better." For the crowd, proves a stronger point, which is exactly what his good friend Robin told him in the last movie.
See, that's one that I don't know if I would have necessarily caught
I don't think I would have.
had I not just watched it.
I'm really glad that they put this in there because, and I'll talk about it more later on, but if you watch Finn close in this movie, you can see that not only being like kidnapped and almost killed by the grabber is still really affecting him, but also the loss of his friend.
Yeah.
Like it's those two things that are heavily affecting him here. So while they're having this conversation, a car pulls up next to them and starts talking, and this is where we meet our third main character, Ernesto, who is the slightly younger brother of Robin, which is played by the same actor that played Robin in the last movie, which totally blew me away when you told me that. I definitely did not recognize him, which is a test to how good of an actor he is.
Yeah, what's really cool about this too is they didn't necessarily plan for that to happen. The guy who played Robin and Ernesto came in to read for the role of Ernesto, and they were kind of on the fence about it, and he nailed it. And
Yeah.
I was like, damn, I was kind of surprised to hear he had to come in and read for that part. I figured they just planned that, but it also makes sense of why they made him so much different looking than Robin, like so much different style and
Yeah.
hair, and they gave him glasses and kinda to separate him, but man, they did such a good job, you cannot tell.
Well, basically, what they decided to do was because they all got along so well in the last film, they actually brought him in to read with Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw while they were still, this was like really early on in production, and they were still trying to cast the Ernesto part. And after a few sessions, they were like, dude, this is Ernesto. This dude can totally pull it off. And then, of course, Mason and Madeline both really wanted him to be in the movie.
Yeah, and it makes sense with Ernesto kinda being what Robin was to Finney as far as a best friend character.
Yeah.
Like, she takes the main role in this movie, and that is kinda her best friend character, although they kinda have, like, a romance thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. It parallels the first, and that is one thing that they do throughout this movie is paralleling the second one with the first one with these very symbolic things, and I thought that was one thing that goes into like a perfect sequel.
So, during this conversation, it quickly becomes clear that Ernesto has a thing for Gwen as we then see him invite her to a concert this weekend, to which she eagerly agrees. And when he drives off, it becomes obvious that Gwen likes him too. But the only problem is Finn, who, despite him being Robin's brother, just doesn't like him and claims that he doesn't really know why. So later that night, we see Finn hanging out watching some TV, and this is where we get a bit of an update on their father, Terrence. And we see that he has done a complete 180 from the last film, where he appears now to be completely sober and not an asshole to his kids. I'm so glad they gave Terrence a redemption in this one. And they also kind of show us what sent him in that direction. And I think that what they do here is they make the character more realistic and believable because most people that are like that in real life, they have an alcohol problem or whatever, they probably went through something kind of fucked up. And it kind of causes them to be bitter and sad and angry and relying on like substance abuse to numb the pain. And we don't get that backstory for a lot of characters in the movie, but they actually do kind of come back around and fill that backstory for why Terrence was like he was in the first movie.
Yeah, I mean, you know kind of the situation, and if you watch the first movie, though, he just seems like an abusive asshole father.
Yeah.
This one, you actually get to see what sent him into that. And also, like with the other movie, you see like it took a major situation to get him out of that as well. Like a major life-changing situation, his son was almost murdered. But despite that, they do drop hints that he has still struggled with staying sober in the 4 years since then, which I like that they put that in there because that's a lot more realistic.
Yeah, and they could have very easily just wrote Terrence out of this movie
Yeah.
or had a very tiny part for him, but they do manage to not only give him that redemption, that backstory where we can sympathize with the character, but they also include him in this movie. And I like all their decisions on that. So anyway, after Terrence goes to bed, Finn abandons the TV and heads outside to smoke the devil's lettuce, which tells us that he is now using to try and numb his pain. And while this is going on, we see that he is actively reliving parts of what happened in that basement. And this stuff, it is so important because with this and the Robin stuff, it appears that everyone else has moved on, but Finn seems to still be stuck in the past, constantly reliving the situation and all those feelings that came with it, like over and over again.
Yeah, he is definitely being haunted by the grabber. He has some probably severe PTSD as well as the grabber, kind of legitimately haunting him to the point where he's sitting there smoking a joint. The grabber in his head is there with him, and he's literally like saying quotes from the first movie when he was locked in that basement. So you can really tell that he has not had an easy time, and I love that about this movie. Like, it's such a more realistic instead of them having that.
Happily ever after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it reminds me of one of the only good things of Rob Zombie's second Halloween, which is where they show kind of a more realistic version of somebody who just went through this. Yeah, I really like that decision.
So Gwen, who obviously has known about the drug use, then comes outside and attempts to talk to her brother because she definitely sees that he is stuck in this rut. But we quickly see that Finn has no interest in talking about it with anyone, including the person that he is closest to. After that, we then get some grainy Super 8 footage where we see a bunch of kids arrive at Camp Alpine back in the 50s, which is covered in snow. And we spot this kid in a yellow coat getting off of the bus and playing with some of the other kids, and his name is Felix, which I don't know if you noticed this, but that is the kid Ethan from the show From. Did
Ah,
you pick up on that?
no, I did
Yeah.
not.
Yep, that's Ethan. Anyway, everything seems great at first until we get some nighttime footage showing what we assume is the grabber chasing Felix through the woods at night, where he eventually catches him and brutally murders him with a hunting knife. We then get some quick shots of the grabber gutting the kid before then cutting to a frozen lake where we see a very badly wounded and dead Felix floating under the ice. And once he gets close to the surface, he then lifts up his hand and carves the letter W in the ice.
Yeah, so this is the first Super 8 footage that we get. This is the first legitimately scary scene of the movie. Like
And it is good too.
the no dialogue, like him being chased through the dark woods, super creepy. The stabbing to death, for some reason, like the blood red in the snow just looks so good. Like it's such creepy imagery. And then lastly, we see him carve a letter into the ice, which if we remember from the beginning, Hope is she gets a phone
Yeah,
number
she's
carved in the
numbered,
ice.
yeah.
So we're seeing that there's some different messages being passed on here.
So after he starts to disappear into the dark water below, a phone rings, causing Gwen to jump up out of bed and go to answer it. She then ends up realizing that the sound is coming from outside, where she opens the door and looks out into the neighborhood, but is soon interrupted by Finn, who calls her name, snapping her out of her dream. And it is then revealed that she was sleepwalking while dreaming. Just in case you haven't seen the first movie, Gwen's dreams are very special, and she sometimes is able to see things that should be impossible and even communicate with the dead, and that is what you're seeing here. Another important thing is for us the viewer, her dreams are always in this Super 8 style.
Which they did in the first, and I love that they kept that. Every one of the Super 8 footage from the first movie was her dreams.
Yep.
It was her visions that ends up leading her to the house across the street where Finney was. A awesome, awesome thing to keep you, the viewer, in line with the story. Like, you know when you see this Super 8 footage that she is in a dream. And it's really cool because there's multiple times where she wakes up where you would think that she's now out of her dream, but you know as the viewer, because we're still seeing the Super 8 footage, that she is still within a dream.
Yeah, I think that, that was an important thing in the first movie, but it is an extremely important thing in this movie because we start getting, like you're saying, like she wakes up and it seems like she's not in a dream anymore, but she obviously still is. And then there's some kind of overlap with some time and someone else having a dream. We'll get to that later, but it becomes extremely important to have that different kind of footage to tell us it helps you follow the story.
Yeah, yeah. Not only is it an awesome artistic and really scary way to add to the movie, but it definitely it's like at the end of the movie it's vitally important to be able to stay on track of what's going on. Yeah, I love that they kept that aspect of the movie in the second one.
Well, one thing I actually didn't realize the first time I watched it, but the second time when I went to write this episode is a vast majority of the finale of this movie is in Super 8.
Yeah.
And that's crazy that they filmed such a crazy ending because if you've seen the behind the scenes, you've seen them back there holding that tiny Super 8 camera filming.
Yeah.
That shit is crazy that they filmed such a big budget finale on a technology that's been outdated for a very long time.
Well, they can't do a lot of the certain like digital effects or anything on the Super 8. Like we talked about that in Sinister that whenever the death scenes all had to be shot in, like, one take. One that really sticks out to me is the family that gets pulled into the pool,
Oh, yeah.
all tied up and duct taped. Like,
Mhm.
there was stunt actors who legitimately had to let them tie them down to a lounge chair and pull them into a pool backwards, which is just mind blowing that they even talked anybody into letting them do that. There's no fucking way in hell. I don't care if I got my chance to be in one of these movies, I would not let anybody pull me in a pool
No.
like that. But yeah, they're very limited on what they can do with the Super 8, and they shot the whole climax of this movie, and that's just a testament to how much they lean into practical effects.
So, three really important things here. One, despite being in the warm house, Gwen's skin is ice cold when Finn touches her, which is interesting because in her dream, she was transported to Camp Alpine where it's covered in snow and very cold. Two, she actually attempts to talk to Finn about her dreams, but we see that he isn't interested and shuts this down pretty much immediately. And finally, number three actually happens in the next scene, but we see that Gwen is not only reading books about weird dream stuff, but also the word has gotten out about how she found Finn at the grabber's house 4 years ago, and now people at her school think she's some kind of witch and are kind of constantly fucking with her about it.
Yeah, I do love going back to the skin, her skin being cold, Finney telling her your skin is like ice. It's kind of a little bit of foreshadowing to what's going to happen later in this movie, but also a really important part of that scene is if you listen really close, there's a phone ringing in the distance. She is standing in the doorway and you can hear a phone out in the neighborhood ringing.
I didn't catch that. That's good. That's a good catch. So, right after this, Ernesto walks over and starts up a conversation with her where he not only says he is cool with her interest in ghosts and psychic dream stuff, but he even encourages it by giving her a deck of tarot like cards, which makes her like him even more and causes her to kind of lower that guard that she always has up with everybody because she has been so ridiculed by her peers for her beliefs for so long now. Next, we see Finn walking out of the store when suddenly an out of order payphone begins to ring, causing him to casually walk over, pick it up, and just say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," and then slams the receiver down. And if you pay close attention to his body language, it becomes obvious that this is something that he has been dealing with for years, showing us that Finn thinks dead kids are still attempting to get a hold of him for some kind of help, but as we will find out later on, that is not the case. So after that, we then cut back to some more Super 8 footage of Camp Alpine. But this time, it looks like we're kind of closer to the 60s. And because this is Super 8, we are obviously seeing another one of Gwen's dreams. But this time around, we meet a boy named Cal, who was attending a campfire with some friends when he then heads back to the cabins down a trail in the woods. And at some point while in these woods, he is chased by the grabber who catches him, murders him, and then chops parts of his body off with a axe that he carries on his belt. And to make matters even worse, we then see the grabber place the pieces of Cal into a large oven and set him on fire until he is almost unrecognizable. We then cut to Cal under the ice on Lake Alpine, just like we saw with Felix, and when he arrives at the surface, he then scratches a B next to Felix's W, giving us either some kind of initials or the beginning of a word. We don't know yet.
It's Warner Brothers. Man, shout out to
True.
Warner Brothers.
I do love this kill too. This is a good one. And I don't know why, man, but that like the little kid body, like hands and stuff in the oven,
Oh, dude, that
it's
scene is
rough.
fucking. They did such an amazing job on this. The fact that they did all of this in practical effect too, like you can just tell. I mean, not only is it on the Super 8 where they don't have the ability to go in and do the same digital stuff that they normally would, but I feel like they would have done this practical anyway, just because they try to do everything practical. But you can just tell when something is done fully practical, it just looks so real.
Yeah, definitely. And
Like, it's
this is a
so
great scene.
so fucking, like, sk it's almost crazy that they put this in here, like,
Yeah.
this is a chopped up child being set on fire, and
Yeah.
YouTube's gonna hate us for me saying that, but yeah, it looks absolutely fantastic.
So, just like last time, Gwen is awoken by this phone, which causes her to get up, leave the house. She spots Cal's dead body in the front yard and then follows the sound of the ringing phone down the street. This leads her to the grabber's house, prompting her to head over to the basement window and look inside, where we see the infamous basement from the last movie. And it appears that the ringing is coming from the black phone that Finn used when he was trapped down there. Gwen then climbs inside and answers it, and who do we hear on the other end? It's Hope. And this is the conversation from the very beginning of the movie. This is kind of our first loop around. So somehow, Gwen has not only managed to talk to the dead, but also has now bridged some kind of communication with the past. Because if you remember, Hope makes that phone call in 1957. And it is also revealed that Hope is Gwen and Finn's mother, who, if you remember from the last movie, killed herself years ago because she also had these weird dreams that, according to Terrence, drove her crazy.
Yeah, so this is really important because this shows you that time is relative in the beyond. Time can be completely bent and misconstrued. Those kids left their mom a message to contact her own daughter in the future, which goes, it tells you that without going too deep into it yet, but these kids almost knew that Hope was not to be the one that to find them. And they instead of leaving her initials to try to help her figure it out, they leave her a phone number to allow her to call into the future when more pieces of the puzzle are actually there for their bodies to get found. And that really ties around to a theory that I have later on, but it's really fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I got some stuff to say on it later on too, but I think you're headed in a good direction. I like where you're going. So basically, what this conversation is about is Hope is dreaming of these kids writing this phone number in the ice, which prompts this call. And Gwen is dreaming of the kids writing the letters. So they are both getting these dreams of these murdered kids at Alpine Lake, but at two completely different times, which one is in 1957, the other one's in 1982. And the whole reason this happens is because, as we'll see later on, before she died, Hope actually attempts to solve this mystery, but fails. And now it's kind of Gwen's chance. And this call had to take place in order to point Gwen in the direction of Alpine Lake.
It's also important to note that in the first movie, time does not exist for these kids that are trapped in the beyond. Like, they can no longer track time, and they actually very quickly begin forgetting everything
Yeah.
about their personalities or who they were. So it's almost as if time does not exist, and this whole call shows you that time is relative in the afterlife. Like, it is not on a timeline that the living world follows.
Another important thing, too, is Hope does not know this is her daughter in the future. Because before Gwen can tell her, the phone line gets staticky and cuts off the call like we saw in the beginning. So this is not like she's delivering a message to her daughter purposely.
Yeah, no, no, that's definitely important to know. She has no idea, although Gwen does because of her name, which, you would think that she would have more of a reaction figuring out it's her mom, but I think you make a good point. The phone call was cut too short for her to be able to mention that.
So once Gwen hangs up the phone, she turns around only to be shocked at the sight of a dead man standing there with an axe in his head. Who is Max, the grabber's brother from the last movie, who is, of course, played by the late and great James Ransone, who very recently passed away. Not too long ago, when we did the episode on the Black Phone, I was just talking about how much I love this dude and everything he was in. It really sucked when he died. Kind of bothered me for a few days. It's a big bummer. He had a lot of, past issues and stuff that we're not going to get into, but he was very public about it. But yeah, he will forever live on in the hearts and minds of horror fans everywhere.
Yeah, I would imagine that this was the last movie that he probably did,
I
'cause that
think it was.
just happened in December.
Yeah, it was only 2 months after this came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad. Rest in peace to him.
But anyway, Max tells her that she shouldn't be here when suddenly they both notice the big metal door to the basement open, revealing a very menacing grabber slowly walking down the stairs. But this is soon interrupted by the black phone suddenly ringing again, and as Gwen looks at it, the phone slowly changes into a very old broken version with the wall behind it covered in spray paint. We then hear Finn calling Gwen's name again, and this is when Gwen kind of fully snaps out of the dream and looks around, where they are now both standing in the basement, but obviously the house appears to be abandoned and people have broken in and vandalized this now infamous room where many kids were murdered and Finn was held captive. Finn then tells his sister that he saw that she was sleepwalking again, but this time he didn't wake her up and decided to follow her, where they both ended up here. She then tells him that she was on the phone with their mother, but after the initial shock, Finn shoots this down as just another weird dream. As they both head back, Finn stops to look at the room, hopefully for one last time, and Gwen notices that despite it being a dream, she still has Cal's blood on her sock. I love that they brought the basement back again, but this time we get to see, I guess, like the aftermath of how the public sees this place, where, terrible things happened. It reminds me of the scene in Walt's house in the last episode of Breaking Bad,
Yeah.
where he goes back for the ricin and, he's been all over the news as Heisenberg and kids have broken in and vandalized it. Like, it gives me that feeling.
Yeah, the fade from the Super 8 footage to how the basement looked in the last movie into the graffitied up, like, abandoned version back to digital, which is very grainy, dirty footage, fading into clean, pristine footage. I thought that looked amazing. It was really cool however they pulled that off. But also worth noting that the art department who worked on the head lady worked on the first and second one, but she had to recreate this, and I thought she did an amazing job.
Yeah, she actually talks a little bit about how they had a little bit of trouble recreating it, specifically the black and orange crack around the room. So they ended up having to reach out to the team that originally built it in order to find out like the colors and materials. And they worked really hard to make it dead on the original room from the Black Phone. I think they did a fantastic job. And more importantly, I think the way that they incorporate it into the story and the amount of time they showed it was perfect. It was just enough to give us that little callback, but not enough to rub it in our faces.
And for those that don't remember, that line on the wall of the basement was put there to represent the space in between the living and the dead, and that is why the black phone is placed right on that line, as in the black phone lives in the beyond and in the real world. And I thought that was a really awesome thing that they added to the first movie with that crack representing, the gap between the two dimensions. And, that comes into play a little bit in this movie too. We'll get to it in a little bit.
Well, this stuff is one of the reasons I think this is a good sequel, because it's similar enough to the first one where it has that same feel, but it's also different enough to shine in its own way. Like, I really think these two movies, you could have a group of people that like the first one more and a group of people who like the second one more.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely both great movies with completely different feels, but
Enough similarity, yeah.
enough stuff. They do a lot of callbacks, a ton of parallels, a ton of small things like one-liners that they take from the first one that I think a lot of people wouldn't pick up on. The continuity is fucking amazing. They got all the actors back and they delved deeper into the story and the background from the first one and added to it, but in a way that made it better and didn't fuck it up. This is why I say this is a perfect sequel. Like, this is how sequels should be done.
Agreed. So the next day, we see Finn sitting at a table doing homework when suddenly Gwen places a brochure for Camp Alpine down in front of him. She then tells him that this is where mom called her from, and they are just in time to submit their applications to be counselors over the winter break, which will give them an opportunity to find out just what the hell is going on with these dreams. But Finn immediately shoots this down and says that he's not interested in going, and again tries to convince Gwen that her dreams do not mean anything. He has totally morphed into his dad from the first movie. Because if you remember, Terrence told Gwen multiple times that her dreams are just dreams. They don't mean anything. He is also numbing the pain with substance abuse. He is constantly angry and he is annoyed by everybody and attempts to push everyone away. He is his dad from the first movie.
He definitely took the first one hard. I think he believes in Gwen's dreams, but once you start talking about, like, the time not matching up and her speaking to their mom, he kinda just that's too much for him to even think about or try to comprehend. So he kinda just, brushes it off. Yeah, I think the way they wrote this was really good. It's also really, really important to note, and this is one thing I think a lot of people forget if they have not seen the first movie, that is very important to the story at this point, is these kids or whoever's dead, their bodies have to be found in order for them to be set free from the grabber. Like, that is one thing that is a big part of the first movie that if you haven't seen the first movie in a while, you may forget and be very confused at why these kids are reaching out to her. But yeah, essentially, they have to be found to be set free from the grabber.
So, speaking of Terrence, he then walks in the room in the middle of this conversation, picks up the pamphlet, and says, "Oh, your mom worked here years before I met her." And he also says that he doesn't remember much, but he does remember it closed down in 1958, which is the right around the same time that Hope started having the dreams with the kids and made the phone call to Gwen. Gwen then tells her dad about her plan for them to get jobs there over the winter break, and he doesn't say no, but we can tell he's also not thrilled about the idea of it because of its affiliation with religion, which, if you remember from the first movie, Gwen had to hide her interest in Christianity from her dad, and judging by this conversation, he has not changed his opinion on that. We then jump to the next day where we see that Gwen has convinced Ernesto to actually join her at the camp, considering Finn has no interest in going at all. And while watching them load up the car to leave, he then decides at the last minute to join them so he can make sure Ernesto doesn't try any moves on his sister, which makes Terrence feel a lot better about letting his daughter go on this trip. I did notice something interesting here. So Finn asks his dad to please not drink while they're gone, to which Terrence promises that he's done with all that, and he then says that in 2 weeks he will get his 3-year chip from AA. Well, that caught my attention because it's been 4 years since Finn killed the grabber, which tells us that Terrence struggled with drinking for at least a year after the events of the first movie.
Yeah, that's why I said earlier, like, they did it in a very realistic way, and they hint that he very much struggled to get clean, to the point where his kids are really concerned with the fact that he might relapse while they're gone. Like, if they're both not there to stay on top of him, he may very well end up drinking again.
Well, I think also too that this directly explains his reasoning for what he is going to do here in a little bit in the movie. He's not going to stay at that house
Yeah.
because and it explained, because you would think, oh, he's 4 years, he quit, he's good, he's been solid for 4 years. But when you think about it now and you're like, man, he's had some rocky times, it makes sense why he refuses to stay there.
Yeah, I think it's very clear too that his kids really keep him straight and obviously are the ones that helped him through, which is why they're concerned that he's going to drink because this is obviously the first time in 3 years that they've been gone. And we do see later on, like you're saying, that ends up being directly true because of the actions he takes.
So, with Finn, Gwen, and Ernesto all loaded up into the car, we then see them take off, drive out of the city, and towards Camp Alpine, where they end up caught in this massive blizzard. And when they arrive at the camp, the snow is so bad, Ernesto can't see the road, prompting Finn to volunteer to get out of the car and walk the path, allowing Ernesto to follow him so they can get there safely. And not long after he starts treading through the snow, he is approached by a girl on a horse who tells them to follow her into camp. And as they pull in, they meet the camp's owner, Mondo, who informs them that the girl on the horse is his niece Mustang, who works here, and that because of the blizzard, they canceled camp and called all the other counselors to inform them. But unfortunately, Gwen and Finn had already left by the time they had called, which means they are not only snowed in for a few days, but also they will be the only people here besides the 4 main workers that were already here. Considering it is already late, they then show the gang to their cabins, and because of state law, Finn and Ernesto are in one cabin and Gwen is forced to sleep alone in the girls' cabin. So, like I said earlier, they did very little set decorating to this place, and these cabins actually got the most of what they did do, which was adding their graffiti to the walls and the bed frames. And also, they added those heaters that we see on the wall as an additional light source and to add a more old school creepy feel. I don't really know why, but I definitely thought the heaters were cool. They totally give like a 70s, 80s vibe to me. And I love their graffiti. Like, their graffiti was such a huge, like, us growing up, like, kids graffitied all over fucking everything. And it's just a good touch.
Yeah, so they were added not only for lighting, but the head of the art department added them and said that they paralleled that line in the basement wall.
Oh, that's cool.
But what you'll notice is where the line in the basement wall was, kinda it, went straight across. It was a very straight line. These are, very up and down and kinda all over the place, which kind of shows that line between life and death or the real world and the afterlife is not as clean as it was for Finney. Like, it is very all over the place for her, and we'll see that with her dreams. Like, she is kinda living both in the afterlife and through her dreams, and those 2 worlds are very much
Like overlapping.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, those 2 are very much overlapping.
Yeah, it's a good point. So after everyone goes to bed, we then cut to another one of Gwen's dreams where we meet our third and final victim, a teenage boy named Spike. And we don't really get to see his death like the other 2. Instead, we jump straight to him trapped under the ice as he then scratches the letter H behind the other 2 letters, leaving us with the initials WBH. Dude, after he does this, the scene where his face kind of like it starts to come apart while he's floating.
Yeah.
Cool touch. It's good. It's good.
Yeah. His whole, face getting cut in half, the whole floating thing, this kid is the scariest one in my opinion.
They're all they're all unique. They're I guess the after death looks. They're all unique, and I could see people having their favorites or whatever. But his face cut in half, which is gonna come into play in a really cool scene here in a bit, but it's pretty awesome.
It is the the coolest practical effect, I think, in the movie.
Agreed. So after that, we then cut back to Gwen in the cabin when she suddenly starts to hear a scratching sound from under the other bunk. And when she goes to investigate, it is revealed to be the ghost of Felix, causing her to jump out of the bed, where she is then immediately jump scared by the still burnt ghost of Cal. Both ghost kids look awesome, but Cal, his ghost look is really good. I love the smoke coming out of his jacket. And what they did to pull this off was they built a little smoke machine inside the jacket. It's basically like the miniature Halloween smoke machine, or it works the same way as a vape does. But yeah, very cool idea that they had with the smoke coming out of him.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely looks awesome. Like, even the behind the scenes shit when they're setting it off,
Yeah, it still looks good.
still
Yeah.
looks cool.
So we then see the two dead kids slowly walking towards Gwen, who is cautiously backing away when suddenly Spike slams his hands against the window, scaring her for the third time. He then opens the window, sticking his head inside the cabin, when suddenly the grabber walks up behind him, breaks the window frame, leaving just the glass, and slams it down on Spike's head, cutting half of his face off, which then splats on the floor like raw meat right in front of Gwen, scaring the shit out of her. I don't know how I forgot about this part when we talked about it on the best of episode, but this face effect, when it hits the floor, it's my favorite effect of the whole movie.
Yeah, it just like cutting a face in half is one thing, but cutting it like down at it like a slash angle just looks so much more fucking creepy. This is definitely the coolest effect in the movie, and I think that this dream sequence is legitimately scary as fuck.
It is, yeah,
Like,
it is the best dream sequence. I agree.
yeah, the Super 8 footage, and then all the, like, really like, the kids in the first movie, they did go in and do practical makeup on them, and they are dead and kind of fucked up looking, but these kids, they took to a whole 'nother level.
Yeah.
Like, they are legitimately fucking scary as fuck looking. Even though you know they're not the bad characters in this movie, it's still horrifying.
Yeah, I remember you got that picture when we did the first one of all of the kids standing in the road when they like scare Gwen. You know, they're trying to show her
Yeah,
a
yeah,
house.
yeah.
None of those kids have shit on any of these dead kids. Like,
No.
these dead kids are a whole nother like 2 levels above them with how fucking creepy they look.
Yeah, I think that they leaned a lot heavier into the horror in this movie than they did the first one.
Now, the whole time this is happening, Finn is outside trying to smoke a doob when suddenly the old out of order payphone begins to ring. Finn then answers it, repeating a line he has said over and over again, which is, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." But this time he hears a familiar voice on the other end, as we then hear the grabber say, "Hello, Finny," which immediately scares the fuck out of him, causing him to drop the phone. When the grabber then says, "Hell is not flames, Finny, it's ice. Nothing burns like the cold," revealing that it has been the grabber trying to call him from hell this whole time. And now that they are at Camp Alpine, he is finally strong enough to get this message through.
Well, I I don't know if it's the grabber that's been calling him the whole time, because we do see that the mom actually had Finny and Gwen's power. And I'll point that out when it shows it on one of her flashbacks, but she had the phone ringing thing too, where kids called her from the afterlife. And the reason I say I don't know if it's been the grabber this whole time is that they did another really cool call out from the first movie. I don't know if you caught it, but he answers the phone and he says, you know, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," and hangs it up. And then it starts ringing like over and over again, doesn't
Yeah, it
stop.
doesn't stop.
And the reason that catches his attention is it is the same thing that happened in the basement in the first one. When he finally does talk to the dead kid for the first time, the phone, he literally like takes it off the hook and puts it back down, and it starts ringing nonstop, and it won't stop, and that's when he finally picks it up in the first one and talks to the first dead kid, and when he hears the phone do that, that's why it catches his attention, is it's the same exact thing that happened in the basement.
That's a good point. I don't personally know. I got that from an interview. I I didn't really think about it all that much. I just kind of went with what I came across,
Mm.
but good point.
It might be if it was an interview. I
I don't
don't know
remember.
if it was an interview with the writers or
I
not.
want to say it. I want to say it might have been Joe Hill that said it.
Yeah, wait,
But
yeah, he's I don't think he wrote any, he did have the idea, he obviously got credited because he was the original story creator, and you might be right. I just always took it as Finney would get these calls from these dead kids because he has this power that his mom obviously had too. I did think that the shout out back to the first movie with the phone continuously ringing right after he hangs it up, grabbing his attention was really cool. It's another thing I wouldn't have caught had we not just covered the first one.
so after Finn slams the phone down, he hears Gwen screaming from her cabin when he then quickly runs to help her, finding her standing in the middle of the room by herself, scared to death. I've seen reviews with this movie talking about how Madeline McGraw wasn't a very good actress.
What?
But dude, scenes like this, like I just don't get it. Like she kills it in this movie, especially with these high emotional scenes.
She is a fucking phenomenal actress in both movies. Like,
Yeah,
even for as young as she was in the first one, I thought she was the best actress in the entire movie, and that's
yeah,
saying something because everybody was fantastic. Yeah, I think she has amazing ability to go places that other actors and actresses can't go, and the fact that somebody said that is
it's crazy.
crazy to
Yeah,
me. I don't know why you would think that.
I agree. Now, considering both kids are extremely shook up, Finn ends up taking Gwen back to his cabin for the night where she lays in bed with Ernesto and once again asks Jesus for help. And we see here that she now has a burn on her arm from where the ghost cow grabbed her in the dream. So we're getting very Nightmare on Elm Street here, and I personally loved it.
Yeah, that is very interesting too that Gwen's praying to Jesus to have dreams in the first one. Now she's praying to Jesus to not have dreams.
Yeah. So the next morning, the three get up and head towards the mess hall when Gwen then informs Finn that she told Ernesto about everything, including Finn getting the random phone calls, which very much angers him. And this is where we find out just how closed off Finn has become in the last 4 years because Gwen calls him out for not having one single friend to talk to or hang out with. She then shows them the burn on her arm from the dream, and despite Finn continuously telling her they don't mean anything, he quickly realizes something really bad is happening. But before they can discuss it more, Mondo interrupts, telling them to come get breakfast. While eating, Mondo starts talking to them and attempts to find out why they are even there, especially considering they don't attend any churches. And this is where it is revealed that Mondo actually knew Hope really well when she attended the camp, calling her by the nickname Starlight. After this conversation, Finn then tells the others about the grabber calling him last night, but this is quickly interrupted when he hears the phone ringing again and runs to answer it. But this time, it is the three dead kids asking for his help, having been dead for so long they don't remember much of anything at this point. One thing I found pretty interesting about the dead kids is if you pay close attention, they dress them all in very different winter clothes in order to show us that they are all from kind of different time periods. So they didn't all die like at the exact same time. Like it was years apart between them, which, goes along with the first movie because it was the same way in that one.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out that I think a lot of people probably wouldn't recognize is that, this wasn't 4 kids, 5 kids that died in the same year. This slowly happened over a period of time that eventually led to this place getting shut down.
So after that, we then quickly cut back to the city where we see Gwen call her dad and tell him that they're snowed in and they won't be back for a few days. And when he gets off the phone, he spots a beer commercial on the TV. But instead of giving in and drinking, throwing years of sobriety down the drain, he decides to call a friend and ask a favor, wanting to borrow one of their snowplows. We then jump back to the office where Gwen and Ernesto meet the only other two camp workers still at Lake Alpine. And this is super Christian married couple Barb and Kenneth, who get very agitated when Gwen starts asking about the missing or dead kids, leading to Gwen telling Barb to fuck off and calling her a sanctimonious twat. These two have definitely gotten off to a rough start. So after that, we then skip to later that night where we see Gwen having another dream. But this time, it starts out with her actually watching her mother back in 1957 get the phone calls from the dead kids. And because they hadn't been dead all that long during this call, they're able to remember that they are in a frozen lake.
See, and this is why I said, like, Gwen had that power that Finney has. Like, he was just on the phone with these kids. He gets random phone calls all the time from payphones from dead kids. And it seems, Gwen doesn't have this. Gwen has the dreams. And we see here that their mom actually had both.
Yeah.
And it kind of split between the two.
Yep. So Gwen then ends up following Cal into the mess hall when we then cut to Finn waking up from the sound of the phone ringing again, prompting him to jump up, wake Ernesto, and tell him to go check on Gwen while he runs to the phone booth. So once Finn answers the phone, we see that it is once again the grabber. But this time, while they are talking, we actually see the ghost of the grabber standing outside of the booth, angrily staring at Finn while they communicate. And this is the first time we have actually seen him in his dead form, and he looks pretty cool because his mask is like covered in frost from the frozen hellscape that he has been trapped in the last 4 years. So basically, what we learn from this phone call is the grabber is super pissed at Finn for not only killing him, but also because he caused him to kill his brother, who apparently was the only person he actually cared about. He then explains that since his death, he has been in hell, but instead of the lake of fire we all know, it's actually a frozen, painful hell where he has slowly been losing the human parts of him, leaving only the evil, despicable parts. And now that he has Finney right where he wants him, he plans on getting his revenge by going after what Finn cares about the most, which is his sister. And while this is going on, we see Gwen enter the kitchen where she encounters the grabber for the first time ever. And as he steps out of the shadows, donning his frozen mask and axe, we also see Ernesto run into her cabin and realize she isn't there, forcing him to wake up Barb, Kenneth, and Mustang to help him look for her.
I loved how when Finney goes in the phone booth and hears it's the grabber, he closes the door like he's ready for a fight. Like he's literally he's not scared, or he at least doesn't show fear. But do you remember in the first one how much we talked about how the grabber doesn't necessarily like killing as much as he likes the fear.
The lead up to it, yeah.
It's literally he gets off on the fear that he puts. That's why he plays all these games with these kids and sets these traps for them to think that they're going to be able to escape. And the killing is just, the cherry on top for him. It's not what he actually enjoys the most. And that's why he gets so bummed about Finn, because Finn doesn't show the same fear.
Yeah.
You remember at one point he goes down with the sad face, and he talked about even considering letting him go because he can't get the same fear because the kids on the phone are telling him not to play these games. That's what he really likes. And this whole thing is about, he's been wanting to get this fear out of Finney, the kid who ultimately ended up killing him. And he can't do it by going after Finney because Finney doesn't show that same fear. So he's going after his sister. And that is the one thing that can actually get fear out of Finney. And that's what I thought the genius of this entire plot line was him not only going back for that revenge, but getting that fear that he was never able to get out of Finney.
Yeah, one thing that I really find interesting about this scene, and it doesn't really say it in the movie, but I just kind of have it in my head canon, is when she's in that kitchen and he first walks out and she sees him, she's got to think like, "Holy fuck, how did my brother beat this dude?"
Yeah,
Because I mean, he is fucking menacing for sure.
yeah,
So
yeah. He didn't beat this version of him, but
no,
she's not
but
thinking that.
she's not thinking that. So after hearing the grabber's true motives this time around, Finn slams the phone down and runs off to find his sister, where we then cut back to the mess hall where we see the grabber attack Gwen, gashing her forehead with the blade of the axe. While this is happening, Barb, Kenneth, Mustang, and Ernesto run into the room where they spot Gwen on the floor, appearing like she is wrestling with an invisible person. Because technically, Gwen is still in her dream, which is why she is able to see him and they can't, and also why the grabber can hurt her. At first, they seem pretty confused about what she's actually doing on the floor here, but this quickly goes out the window when she suddenly flies into the air and slams into the refrigerator, now floating about 3 feet off the ground, which freaks this group out pretty bad at first. Gwen is then thrown across the room where she is quickly picked up, spun around in circles, thrown into another wall, and then appears to float towards the big ovens, which are turned to high, displaying tall flames. And thankfully, right before she is placed inside, Ernesto and Mustang snap out of it and run over to help by grabbing Gwen's legs and pulling her away from the ovens as hard as they can. As this happens, we then see all of the pots and pans fly off the wall at the mystified group, hitting Barb in the head, sending her and Kenneth to the ground. Right after this happens, Finn suddenly runs into the kitchen, absolutely shocked by what he is seeing. And when the grabber spots him, he lets go of her, causing her, Ernesto, and Mustang to fall to the floor and disappears into the shadow. This scene was awesome. I remember how excited I got when I first seen it. I was like, holy shit, we are ramping it up for this movie. I also love how they it almost seems like the grabber's a little scared of Finn, which is why he's, I want to say that's got to be part of the reason he's targeting Gwen, because he doesn't really go after Finn the whole movie.
Well, I think like I was saying before, like he is scared of Finn because he's the only person that he's not been able to get that fear reaction
Well,
out of.
fear is the
It's
grabber's one of his main weapons.
Yeah,
And it doesn't work on Finn.
it doesn't. It's the only kid that he ever went after that didn't play his games and ultimately removed his mask and killed him. So instead of going after him, he's realized the one place where Finney's vulnerable, and that is his sister. Yeah, this scene's fucking awesome though. Like if any scene is really like Nightmare on Elm Street-ish,
Yeah.
which is what people complained about, which I think is considering the plot line and the story completely crazy because this movie deserved to be able to go there based off of the story. But I loved it, man. I thought it was awesome.
I did come across somewhere that this was actually an ode to the Tina kill in Nightmare on Elm
Yeah.
Street. Yeah. Where they drag her all around the fucking room and shit. And I can't remember his name. The dude, her boyfriend, is like
Uh-huh.
watching in disbelief. And that's kind of exactly what happens in this scene.
Yeah.
So after this event that has left this whole group stunned, they then wake up Mondo and head to the camp's church, where Mondo, who totally believes their story, but also tells them the story of the 3 missing kids. And basically the story goes that back in the 1950s, Mondo didn't own the place, he just worked there. And despite the police doing 3 different investigations, they never had a suspect, never found any bodies, and the only clue they came across was a few small pieces of Cal's jacket in the oven. Mondo made a promise to the kid's parents that he would never stop looking after the last kid vanished. The camp then shut down in 1958, where Mondo eventually bought it from the now dead owner's estate, where he not only reopened the camp, but he also continued looking every day for the kids' bodies. Still confused about how this is connected to Finn and Gwen, Mondo ponders what the missing piece of the puzzle could be when Finn finally speaks up and asks if they have ever heard of the Grabber, to which they all say they have. He then reveals that he was the kid who killed him, and he is positive he also killed these 3 boys years before, which absolutely floors the camp staff. Mondo then shows Finn and Gwen an old group picture of their mom at the camp, and Finn notices a familiar face, as he then points out to Mondo a young adult version of the Grabber, which Mondo immediately identifies as Wild Bill Hickok, a maintenance worker that spent years employed at the camp, which goes right back to Gwen's dreams when she saw the kids write the initials WBH in the ice, which leads them to realize that this is where the Grabber started his killing spree, making Felix, Cal, and Spike his first 3 victims. And to top it off, Mondo also reveals that over the past few years, a lot of weird paranormal stuff started happening at the camp that none of them could explain, leading to Finn putting 2 and 2 together and explaining that that stuff didn't start at the camp until after he killed the Grabber, meaning that once the Grabber died, his ghost ended up here at Lake Alpine where he first started killing kids.
Yeah, I love that they added in there Mustang telling Barb, like, you and me both have heard things around here, really hinting at the paranormal aspect for us normal people. Like,
Yeah.
that's what we see, not having Finney or Gwen's powers, but they still picked up on things. Like,
Yeah.
there was still things that happened, like super creepy paranormal stuff that happened, which makes the story make a lot more sense for them and the timeline and all that. But yeah, I thought it was really cool that they added that in there.
So Mondo then gets to the point and asks Gwen where the boys' bodies are buried at, and she tells him that they are underwater at the lake. But if that is true, then the cops would have found them during their investigation. But Mustang jumps in and tells them that because the lake was so frozen over, the cops didn't search it, and Wild Bill had access to the tools needed to cut into the ice back then, allowing him to hide the bodies. Which means, in order to stop the Grabber, they must search the lake, find the bodies, and properly put them to rest, putting an end to the Grabber being able to draw power from his victims and ending his terror on Camp Alpine. So once they make plans to start their search of the lake in the morning, the meeting ends and everyone goes to bed. We then get a quick scene of Mondo catching Finn smoking weed by the lake, where he explains that he can tell Finn is still dealing with a lot of emotions from what happened 4 years ago, and he needs to face those emotions and fears head on to get over it and stop trying to numb it all away or hold it in like he has been doing. The next morning, we see the gang head to the lake and clean off all the snow, leaving just the dark, frozen, cracked ice. And I believe this is the first time we see the huge replica set they built on the soundstage. I thought it was super cool. They actually hand painted those cracks. I believe it would look like they had like a piece of chalk when they were hand painting all the cracks. But man, that must have took forever.
Yeah, that's like the size of a fucking hockey rink.
Yeah. They also talked about how they didn't want to go with the frozen white ice that you would normally see and instead settled on a much darker color to make the viewer feel like under that ice is something cold, dark, and evil. Very, very detailed, cool job. I love how they just did a practical set. That's just awesome.
Yeah, the head of the art department, man, I have her name in my notes, but shout out to her.
Yeah.
Because she absolutely fucking kills it. That was her decision to essentially do the entire lake practical. And the fact that they built these like rocks and trees and stuff based off the real photographs of the lake is just mind blowing. Like when you see this set inside with the lights on and how big it is and how detailed it is, It's so awesome, man. I would love to work on sets like this.
Totally.
Like, that's so cool. This lady's gotta have, like, the coolest job in the world.
Yeah, and it sucks, man, because Hollywood is moving away from practical sets. They want to do that, have just basically a big curved screen behind you and they can just pretty much put a picture or whatever they want. And I hate it.
Well, thank God we have dudes like this who literally not only, like, stick to practical effects, but they love the genre so much they literally went back and watched 80s horror just to see how cinematography-wise they were shot.
So they end up spending all day cleaning and searching this ice and finding nothing. And once it gets too dark, they all head back to the camp and go to bed. And this is where Finn informs his sister that him and Ernesto are going to take shifts in case she has another dream. He then tells her that if she does encounter the grabber, to fight back, because it is her dream after all, and she has the power to defeat him despite her believing that he is too strong. And after Gwen falls asleep, Ernesto walks over and asks Finn, "Did you really talk to my brother when you were down in that basement?" Which I think is such an important question for Finn to have to answer when it comes to a family member of Robin. Because like I said earlier, I think not only the stuff with the grabbers got him like so fucked up, but also losing his close friend in a horrific way and then like speaking to him after he has died, which has obviously been his issue with not liking Ernesto.
Yeah, I definitely think that's why he doesn't like Ernesto. I think that it reminds him of Robin, like, in losing his best friend. I don't think Ernesto's so much different from Robin too, that I think that also kinda makes him push him away. Because you would think, that was your best friend, his little brother, you would wanna be close with him, but I think it just reminds him so much of losing Robin and how different he is that it just makes him not want anything to do with him.
Well, I think another part of that too is I think he's been avoiding this question from Robin
Yeah.
because they know that pretty much what actually occurred in the first film has now spread throughout the town. People know. And I think he wants to keep him at a distance to avoid this question. But now, with him having to finally answer this face to face, I think it is going to help him move on.
I think it's also really important for Ernesto to hear this. And the way Finney answers this question, if there was ever any doubt from Ernesto about what took place or, Gwen's visions or Finney's ability to talk to the dead, this answers any of those questions. Like,
Yep.
he answers it in a way that only Robin could have said.
So after Finn and Ernesto have their emotional chat about Robin, we then cut to another one of Gwen's dreams where we see another familiar face. Billy Showalter, which was one of the victims from the last movie. And if you listen to our Black Phone episode, you should remember that this was the only kid that was based off of a real child abduction case that was never solved.
The paper boy.
Yep. So we once again see Billy kidnapped by the grabber's black van, but this time it is a much younger version of the grabber. And the reason this is important is because we then see Hope wake up after her dreams show her that Wild Bill from Camp Alpine is the one who kidnapped Billy, which sets her off to go investigate. And Gwen is now following her mom in the past, showing her exactly what led to her supposed suicide. Hope then drives to the grabber's house in the middle of the night, where she immediately runs over to the side where the basement window is, and she quickly spots Billy laying on the mattress, still knocked out from the drugs. But unfortunately for her, the grabber spots her, drugs her, and throws her in the van, prompting the ghost of the grabber to invite Gwen inside to see what happens next. And while riding in the back, she actually has a brief conversation with the former serial killer where he tells her that he is the one that is showing her this as a kindness towards her. And this scene is really cool because the grabber only has like the bottom of his mask on, showing us the top half of his face, and it appears his skin is so badly burned by the cold, it has begun to split open in random spots and bleed.
Yeah, so this is actually a really cool parallel. If you pay attention to the first movie, and we talk about it in the episode, so his version of the mask with the upper half removed is his most human side.
Yeah,
It's when he goes in and he's it's actually shortly after he kidnaps Finney and he goes down there and he's
it's
talking to
nice.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's nice to him. This is his most human side, and the fact that they paired that up with his conversation that he has with Gwen in the back of the van, I thought was really, really awesome. And then as soon as they get out of the van, his upper part of his mask is
yep,
like the evil side is back.
yep.
So he has this very brief ride where he talks to her person to person and then immediately puts the mask back on. But kind of how they paired that up, you kind of think that they kind of ditched the whole like different versions of him with the how he wears the mask. But they didn't. If you pay close attention, they actually stuck to that in this movie.
Yeah, and another thing that's kind of interesting about this conversation too is you almost get the feeling that he is trying to show her that this is not personal. This is like I am after you strictly to fuck your brother up. Like,
Yeah,
this is not a me and you thing. This is a me and Finney thing, and you're in the crossfire. So
yeah.
yeah. So the van then suddenly stops with the grabber opening the door and letting Gwen out, where she is immediately shocked by what she sees. And as she stands there with her mouth open, the grabber says to her, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." We then see what Gwen is looking at, which is her mother hanging in the garage dead. And after a few seconds, Terrence walks in and discovers his wife, where he immediately freaks out, runs over to try and lift her up, and yells, "What have I done?" while uncontrollably sobbing, revealing that Hope did not kill herself like they all thought, but was actually murdered by the grabber to protect his secret, making this story finally come around full circle. This is like a super important scene in this story because it explains so much of the first film, especially why Terrence was so angry and sad and against Gwen's dreams, and also why he numbed himself with alcohol for years. So during the scene, the grabber talks a little bit about hell and his experience there. And the reason that I bring this up is because this was all based off of Dante's Inferno, where Dante's depiction of the ninth and final circle of hell is a frozen lake. And this area of hell is not only reserved for the worst sinners and most awful betrayers, but this is also where Lucifer himself resides. And the punishment of this place is typically tied to what sins you did when you were alive. It is kind of custom based on what kind of evil you did on earth, which made me realize that I think the reason that all this is happening is not because the grabber is getting another shot at his enemy, but because the grabber's punishment in this hell is being defeated again by Finn and Gwen, Hope's children, which we know is what he hated the most from his human life. And just to back this up a little, the "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here" is specifically from Dante's Inferno.
Uh, yeah, that's cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, so when I came across this and I started reading about, this level of hell and Dante's Inferno and all this, it made me realize that, man, like, maybe this whole thing is set in motion by hell to punish the grabber.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I did not know that there was that correlation there. It's really cool that they added the quote in there too, just in case you were like most people watching this movie and did not know that that was the final and ninth circle of hell.
Yeah, and then when I came across, because I started reading about this ninth circle, and there's a whole story about it, and basically everyone who is there, their punishment is kind of is directly from what they did on Earth. of what they did so evil, they kind of get it back forever in this frozen hell. They constantly are getting basically the exact same thing that they did to other people. And I think that this is literally hell for the grabber, is being defeated again. And and then losing his victims, So that was my big grand theory of maybe that Finn and Quinn were never going to lose. It was never in the cards for them to lose.
Yeah, I don't know if it was never in the cards for them to lose, but I do like the tie-in with the Ninth Circle of Hell being a frozen wasteland and him essentially living as the sinful version of him on Earth, but in this torturous hell version where this mask is literally like his face is morphing into this mask that he killed kids and it's not morphing into it, it just became it's almost like freezer burned into his skin to where it's become a part of his face. And as we know, he uses the mask in the first movie to hide behind. It's why he freaks out at the end when the mask is knocked off his face. And now living in this hell, he's permanently bound with it as part of his face now. I think that's really cool. I really took from this scene too that I think is a big part of the story, and I'll touch on it more. But this means that although the grabber kidnapped Finney at random, this was not random at all. This was 100% meant to be.
That's what brings me back to, I think this was all punishment for the grabber.
Yeah, I think and proof to that is the kids sending the message to their mom of the phone number to call the daughter in the future, now that more pieces of the puzzle are there to solve the crime and find their bodies. Had Finney not been kidnapped and all of this stuff happened to him, that would have never been of any significance to them. Like, she would have gotten that phone call, but, her mom wouldn't have been killed, her brother wouldn't have been through this, they wouldn't have known about the grabber had he not been, or they would have known about him, but it would not have been still torturing him, it would have never led them back to this place. Finney getting kidnapped was meant to be. And although the grabber thinks it was completely random, it wasn't. Because when I seen this, I thought, well, that's a really cool thing going back and explaining the mom's, apparent suicide and finding out that it was the grabber that actually killed her. But what is the chances that he would end up just randomly kidnapping her son? And I think that shows that it wasn't random. He may have thought it was random, but all of this was meant to be.
Yeah, another thing I'd like to add into it too is, what if Finney, the only reason he defeated the grabber and had the strength was because he had lived through something like his mom dying and then having a really shitty dad?
Yeah.
What if that was the difference that the other boys didn't have? He had already been through such a traumatic thing that had lasted so long, with now he's got this abusive dad. What if that is what gave him the strength to defeat the grabber? If the grabber would have never killed Hope years before, and then Finney did get kidnapped, he could have very well just ended up like the rest of the boys.
Yeah. Also, a big part of that, what made the difference for Finney, was the power that his mom passed on to him of the phone calls. And we don't know if it doesn't ever make it clear when Gwen starts having these visions, but it seems like it's after her mom died. And Finney doesn't get the phone call thing until he gets kidnapped. That's the first time he ever gets that power. So I'm wondering if the mom dying is what passed the powers on to them.
Yeah, could be. Definitely Hope's death is what gives these kids this power and the strength, and all this stuff to accomplish this.
It is the center point of the story that connects everything, and the kids passing the phone number and her calling her daughter in the future and not even knowing it proves that all of this was set in stone to begin with. None of it was at random.
So, after all of this, the grabber then attempts to kill Gwen, but she takes off running where she ends up in his basement, only to be saved at the last minute after getting slashed on her arm by Felix, which then transports her and the grabber to the icy lake at night. She then gets this cut on her arm, and we quickly jump back to the cabin where Ernesto notices the cut appear out of thin air, causing him to wake Finn and Mustang. While standing on the frozen lake, Gwen sees that Mondo is still out there searching by himself, where he has finally discovered one of the boys' decomposing bodies. And right as he begins to break the ice, we see the grabber run over and start to break the ice around Mondo, causing him to fall into the freezing cold water. While this is going on, Gwen hears the phone ring where she spots the phone booth now sitting on the ice, prompting her to run over and answer it. But when she does this, the doors slam shut, trapping her in there, leaving her helpless to help Mondo. Gwen then starts to beat the glass of the booth with her fist, causing her knuckles to bleed very badly. And when we jump back to the cabin, we see that not only is she bleeding a lot from her wounds, but also that Finn is unsuccessful at getting her to wake up. Right as she starts to feel hopeless, the grabber breaks the glass and wraps the phone cord around her neck, slamming her against the walls of the booth, which in turn causes her to slam against the bed frame back in the cabin. He then pulls the cord tight really fast, which causes her to spin very quickly in the booth, flinging blood all over the glass from her wounds. And back in the cabin, Finn, Mustang, and Ernesto stare in disbelief as Gwen's body floats in midair before spinning around, slinging droplets of blood all over them. One of the coolest scenes in the movie.
Very, very Nightmare on Elm Street, too. Super awesome. I thought probably one of my favorite scenes of the movie, and this was all done practical as well. They set a spinning contraption that she was literally tied onto. I won't say tied, she was strapped onto it. And as she spun, it sprayed blood all over the inside of this phone booth. 100% something that would have done or digitally in some way by most movie makers, but they did this shit all practical effects, and on top of that, the actress,
Yeah, Madeline McGraw.
yeah, she did this scene. She did all of her own stunts. She actually had to get her diving license to do some of the parts in this movie. But yeah, so props to her, and another fuck you to whoever said she can't act.
Yeah, that was one of her things for coming back, was she's like, well, I'm older now. I'm not a kid. I want to do my stunts. And they were like, well, all right. Now feeling totally defeated, Gwen sits down in the booth when she suddenly starts to hear Finn yelling at her to fight back, which totally works because she then closes her eyes and causes the booth to explode, sending the grabber flying across the lake. Gwen, who is now soaked in her own blood, then walks over to him and says, "You didn't bring me here. I brought myself here, and I can leave when I want." She then tells him that she now understands that because it is her dream and she has the power now that he can't control. She then grabs his shirt and pulls him in close and headbutts the shit out of him before ending the dream to go save Mondo, which does work because they get to him just in time to save him from freezing to death.
What's interesting is in the beginning of this movie, when Ernesto is in there talking to her in school, she has a stack of books, and those books are really studying mastering dreams and
Like lucid dreaming.
yeah, stuff like that. So I think they put that in there to kind of explain how she kind of begins to master her dreaming and fight back.
So now that he has found the body of Felix, the group then decides they're all going to head to the lake at sunrise to search for the other two boys. We then jump to a little later on where we see Finn and Gwen outside talking when suddenly their dad pulls up in a snowplow. And this is where the truth finally comes out, erupting in the whole family, finally getting on the same page. At first, Terrence and Finn want Gwen to leave right now, with Finn telling her dad that the grabber is trying to kill her. But the feisty teenager says fuck no and starts calling her brother out about not dealing with his feelings like he should. She then calls out her dad for pretending like he doesn't know what his kid is doing and how he is just watching him go down the same dark path he did. This forces Finn to finally break down and admit that he has been scared and angry since the basement, and he just can't take it anymore. After this, Terrence attempts again to get his kids in the truck to leave, but again, Gwen says no, and this is where she reveals to her dad and brother what she just found out, as she then tells him that the grabber killed Hope because she discovered what he was doing. And in order to prove this, she tells Terrence exactly what he said when he first found his wife dead, which only he knew. And this totally floors both of them, with Terrence finally forced to believe his daughter is right about her dream abilities. This is such a good scene between all three actors, especially Jeremy Davies as the dad. Like, it's emotional, it's well structured, it addresses all the problems that we've been seeing this family struggle with, and it has like a satisfying conclusion. And I also think it shows that despite being a little dysfunctional, these three really do love each other.
Yeah, this poor dad, I felt so bad for him in this scene. All their acting was amazing because you legitimately feel bad for him. Like, they set this up in a way that he sees this beer commercial at home, and then he calls and he calls a friend that owes him a favor, clearly. But they don't really explain what that is or what he's doing. So you really think, like, is he going to relapse and drink? Like, what? Why is he doing this after seeing a beer commercial? Now we know, it's kind of what you were alluding to earlier, that his kids have been what has kept him sober. And when he felt that need to drink, he immediately called in that snowplow favor and went to go get his kids and to save them from this snow trap that they're in. And then he gets here and immediately, like, gets cut down, like, the daughter trashes him, like, they have a whole, like, three-way family dispute, and it ends in her not only revealing this massive thing to both of them that neither one of them knew, but also finally he believes her dreams. Like, we see that even after all the crazy events that happened in the first movie, and them finding the body and him driving her around and looking for the houses, although he doesn't believe her dream thing still, but he doesn't want to lose her like he thought he lost his wife. He still didn't believe it, and it finally, like, through 2 movies, almost 2 full movies, he finally is on the same page, and he finally believes her, and it's such a pivotal part to the entire story.
Yeah, it's just done so well, and I feel like because of this little scene, they're now all on the same page. They now all like, all their secrets have come out, and everyone's accepted it and moved on, and that's why I said it shows that even though they've been so dysfunctional, they do really love each other. They're a very close family.
Yeah, and I love how he's like, "Okay, well, if y'all are staying, I'm staying."
Yeah.
Like, they don't even really address that. They just cut to, like, the next day, he's there. He's like, "I'm not going anywhere."
Well, yeah, like, he not only agrees to stay, but he also decides to help them defeat the
Yeah,
grabber.
yeah, like, "Okay, obviously, you're not crazy, and this thing did kill my wife, like, we're about to fuck it up."
Yeah. So, yeah, he agrees to stay, and we then jump to the next day where we watch them attempt to find the other two boys without any luck. We then skip to the night where we see Gwen sit next to Mustang on a horse-drawn buggy to take a break when she then falls asleep, sending her immediately into a dream state on the frozen lake. And when the rest of the group discovers this, Finn realizes that she did this on purpose in order to draw out the grabber and find the other two bodies. This works because she quickly spots a demonic-looking grabber ice skating towards her, holding his axe. Which his skates, they look okay. A really cool idea, but they're definitely like CGI'd. Basically, his skin has fallen off of both his feet, and the blades themselves are ice that is like frozen onto his legs.
Yeah, and it sucks that they CGI'd that because the rest of him is all practical
Yeah.
and it looks so awesome. Like the behind the scenes when they're doing the makeup for his face, even him sitting in the makeup chair looks horrifying.
Yeah.
And then they do his hands, like they do entire hand prosthetics where his hands is split open and have holes all in them. And yeah, outside of the ice skate CGI feat, he looks fucking incredible.
So the grabber then hits Kenneth in the side with the axe, dragging him across the ice, informing the others that he is here. As Gwen then dives in the water looking for the rest of the bodies. This is where we see one of the coolest parts of the movie as the grabber looks back at everyone and rips the bottom of his mask off, revealing he has lost most of his skin and tissue on his face, leaving only frozen, bloody pieces of muscle, bone, and teeth. He looks fucking badass here.
It's his killing face.
And this is like, this is the Super 8 footage. They're like all of the footage showing him is like the old grainy footage.
Well, you remember his killing face though was the angry
Yeah,
face that and instead of him having the angry face to replace the bottom half of the normal face, it's now just his ripped off angry face.
Yeah,
And that's so fucking cool.
it is cool. It looks
Like
great.
like, to really pay attention to the mask phases in the first movie and to know them, and then to figure out that they did that with this movie too. They just did it in different ways and topped it off with the coolest looking prosthetic in the entire movie. Hats off to them, man.
Yeah.
Like I said, they do some stuff in the writing that is incredible.
So while that is going on, Gwen manages to find the bodies in the some old rusted barrels sitting on the bottom of the lake, where she then attaches the hook and pulley system to one. But the grabber, who realizes what she is doing, knocks the spool of wire into the water, where we quickly see Terrence go after it. The grabber then skates over by the rest of the gang, jumps into the air, wrapping his belt around Finn's neck, and flips him over, slamming Finn into the hard cold ice, which is the same move Finn used in the last movie to kill the grabber.
Yep, and it's the same move that Finn took from his best friend,
From Robin, yeah.
Robin, who in the beginning of the movie does that to the bully.
Yep.
So it really comes full circle, and he even makes the comment, "Oh, how the tables have turned." It's a really cool scene.
Now, remember, even though Finn is being attacked by him, he can't see the grabber. Only Gwen can because she is in the dream. Ernesto sees this happen and is stunned until Finn yells for him to get Gwen's unconscious body out of here as fast as possible, which he does. While strangling him, the grabber leans in real close, telling Finney he remembers the feeling. Now, even though in the movie Finn can't see how fucking scary the grabber looks right now, in real life, this was actually the first time Mason Thames got to see the grabber's new design, and he said he was blown away and totally freaked out.
I bet, and there's a awesome shot of them being face to face.
Yeah.
And it's one of the coolest shots of the movie.
Now, with Gwen's help, Terrence is able to get the barrels up to the surface, where Mustang and Mondo help get them out, officially putting an end to the mystery of the missing boys. And now that that's out of the way, Gwen returns to the surface to face off with the grabber, and just in time too, because Finn manages to kick the grabber off, finally allowing him to breathe. Gwen then walks over to him and says, "O grave, where is thy victory? O death, where is thy sting?" Which is, of course, a popular Bible verse. And we see that this definitely grabs the grabber's attention as he then slowly turns around and says, "God's not here and you're alone." But right as he starts skating towards her, she tells him that she brought friends, as we then see the ice break and one of the dead kids grab his leg, causing him to fall and slam against the ice, where his axe slides right over to Gwen. The grabber then gets free and tries to go after her again, with the same thing happening as another dead kid causes him to drop to his hands and knees. He then looks up and sees all three kids standing in front of him, looking pretty pissed off. And before he can really react, Gwen sinks the blade of the axe right into his forehead as he looks up at her in anger. She then grabs his mask and rips it off, tearing what's left of his skin off with it, revealing a very bloody and rage-filled grabber as he repeatedly reaches for the mask back. Finn sees this and runs over, grabbing his head, and right before he starts slamming his face into the ground repeatedly, he leans in close and says, "Hell isn't flames, Bill. It's ice." And right after Finn beats the grabber to a pulp, Gwen chops off his leg, throws him in an ice hole where he manages to grab his mask and lets the three boys pull him under until he disappears into the dark, cold, icy water where he left those kids for years. Gwen then wakes up next to Ernesto, where they then share a long, passionate kiss. And we then jump to the next day where we see Mondo finally get to make that call to the parents to tell them that after years of nonstop looking, he finally found the kids. We then cut to Finn and Gwen getting ready to leave when suddenly the phone rings, but this time, Finn can't hear it, prompting Gwen to walk over and answer it. And it is revealed to be Hope calling from the other side. This is a very emotional scene as we see her mom tell her how proud she is of both of them and she is in a beautiful place. Gwen then asks her if she will always be this cursed, to which Hope responds by telling her it was never a curse but a gift. She then says that she has to go and to tell Finn she loves him, and Robin says hi. A crying Gwen then hangs up the phone and tells her brother what just happened, and you can kind of see here that this was the final piece that he needed to move on. Like, I think Finn is good to move on from this point.
Yeah, super, super great ending. I do love how when they pull his fucking mask off, he starts freaking out. And that
Like in the first one,
parallels
yeah.
the first one in his death scene. Once he loses that mask, it's like he uses that mask to hide behind. And once he loses that in both movies, that is essentially what leads to his death. Like he gives up fighting and all he cares about is getting a part of that mask back to hide behind.
Well, I'm kind of glad that this came back up because there was actually something I remembered that I wanted to say when we did the first movie. Because when he kidnaps the kids out in public, he doesn't have that mask. But you know what he does have? He paints his fucking face white and puts the top hat on. And I think that is his mask. Like, that is what he can get away with out in public.
Yeah.
But he still has a mask.
Well, I think the character was originally supposed to be just a clown and use face paint. If I remember right, it was John Wayne Gacy that Joe Hill based the original idea of the character off of. So yeah, in either sense, he uses something to hide his true face behind at all times when he is the grabber.
Yeah. They then set off to leave with Gwen riding with Ernesto and Finn getting in the truck with his dad. And right as they go to pull off, Finn finally admits that Ernesto is a pretty good dude. And that is the end of Black Phone 2. That's a damn good movie, man.
Dude, Finney bashing his face in too, like, right before using the whole ice line on him was fantastic. Literally, like, the blood and the way they do it, and I really wanted to go back and snap a picture of the last hit on the ice because there's literally chunks of his bone and face, embedded into the ice. And it's such a cool practical effect. Like, I feel like we don't see enough of it because it's so cool.
Yeah, great way to defeat the grabber. I mean, both of them kind of coming together and fucking him up was great.
And it is worth noting that it is a setup for a potential third movie. Like, they do set that up. He does go down with his mask. But yeah, if they wanted to make a third one, he does have his mask still.
Yeah, I mean, they could definitely, I mean, because can you really kill something that's already dead? I mean,
no, he's in hell. But they did say that the kids are what give him his power, like the kids' trapped souls. and with all the other kids, at the neighborhood where they lived being discovered and him losing that power, when he died, he went back to where he went on his first killing spree because those dead kids' trapped souls are what gave him his power in the afterlife. And that's why once they were discovered, he lost all his power and he was essentially defeated. So the question is, does the grabber have more kids that he's
Yeah.
killed somewhere else?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even be opposed to another movie with the grabber per se, but I feel like, maybe Finn and Gwen and Terrence's story is done.
Yeah, I think it's a really good wrap on their story. Now, if they could write a great story and bring in other great characters, and maybe we got this killing spree when he was really young, going to this camp. He was a counselor at this camp, probably in his late teens, early 20s. And then we got skip ahead, years and years later. Was this 55? And then the first movie takes place in 78.
78, yeah.
So we have that whole gap in between.
Mhm.
I find it hard to believe that the grabber didn't kill any kids for that long.
Oh, I agree.
Like, he didn't go kill 5 kids in a very short period of time, and then over the span of 23 years, then he starts killing more kids. I'm sure that there was some kids in between that, and it's very possible, like you said, you can't kill something that's dead. He may have just lost his power in this location. He may he may go somewhere else, or you could also have a prequel of him taking out some kids in that 23-year time span.
Yeah. All right, so ratings and kill count. We already burned through all the facts here. So there's a total of 3 kills. We have Felix, who was hacked to death with an axe. We have Cal, who was chopped and burnt in the oven. And the grabber, who had his face smashed by Finn and pulled underwater by the ghost kids. So favorite kill.
I didn't do a favorite kill on this one, so off the top of my head, I'm gonna say the kid that got set on fire, cut and
Cal.
set on fire,
Mm-hmm.
just because that shot of his body in pieces being set on fire was amazing and crazy that they put that in there and did it in practical effect. And then I would say a second or a close first would be the grabber because of him, the way his head's bashed in and chunks of his bone and face being embedded in the ice, I thought was awesome.
I also went with Cal. That is a very good, kind of jarring kill. And then my second was Felix because man, dude, when they're doing that close up shot where he's literally got him gutted, like, and he's just like pulling or
Oh,
stabbing
yeah.
fucking just his gut, like just pulling his guts out. Yeah, that was good.
They were all fantastic. That's
Yeah.
one thing I will say. All the kill scenes were brutal and awesome looking.
Yeah, and another kind of thing of why I like the ninth circle, like this is his punishment kind of thing, is none of our main characters died. None of our side characters died. The only
Yeah.
kills are from the past. So
Also, one thing with the kids' death scenes too is they were done or at least shown in Super 8, and that always just makes it so much creepier.
agreed. All right, so rating. What do you got?
So, upon a second watch, I gave this movie a 5. I think this is a perfect sequel, not only continuing the story, but adding to it, also answering questions from the first, questions that we didn't even know were questions, like the mom and the whole suicide thing. I thought it was done in genius fashion. The continuity is great, getting all the actors back, literally every single one back, including one that played a different character, played his brother. Like, that is some top-notch continuity in a franchise. They not only realistically expanded on the characters, but they had really good additions, like Mondo,
Yeah.
and Mustang. Thought they were really, really awesome additions. All the characters are likable except the ones that we're not supposed to like Barb and that
Kenneth,
other
yeah,
old
yeah.
guy. The overall feel was great, much darker and legitimately scary. The cinematography was great, the Super 8 footage, like I've probably said 18 times, super awesome. Patty Podesta, that is the name of the art department, the head of the art department, the one who did the recreation of the basement, as well as the whole, like, frozen ice lake thing. Hats off to her. We didn't get her name in the first one, but she is fantastic. Ethan Hawke as the grabber. I thought he was absolutely fucking horrifying in this. I thought as good as he did in the first movie, he's 10 times better in this one. And then the special effects were phenomenal. The kids were super horrifying, completely outshining the first one, the dead kids from the first one. Overall, this is an absolute banger of a sequel, man. This is how sequels should be done.
Yeah, 100%. I gave the movie a 4.8. Like I said earlier, this movie is close enough to the original to be a sequel, but different enough to be distinguishable from the original. I like that they focused on Gwen this time around, which I think adds to my first point, kind of makes this movie distinguishable from the first one. I like the addition of Ernesto. He was a really good character in the fact that they brought that actor back. That was really cool. So happy that they tried to do as much as they could practically. I love that. There was just enough callbacks to the first one, but they didn't have to rely on the first one to be a good movie. I love the fact that they changed the setting to a camp, especially the addition of the snow. We don't get very many snowy horror films. I love the family dynamic in this one. In some ways, it reminds me of my own. The grabber looks awesome. He is way more scary in this. And like I said in the past, I'm totally fine with the Nightmare on Elm Street dream stuff. And of course, the Super 8 grainy footage and specifically for the boys' death scenes. Fantastic movie, a super fun watch. I don't know, I don't know if I want to see a third one. I would be perfectly fine with just leaving this where it is.
Yeah, yeah, I would too. I don't want to see a third one unless they come up with something just absolutely amazing. But I would have said that after the first one too. I do trust the writers in this. They everything they do is really good. So if they did announce a third one, I would trust that it wasn't just for money. It was because they had a legitimate idea. And they've even stated that, they would only be open to it if it was quality over quantity.
Yeah. Well, that is our thoughts on Black Phone 2. Once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website, check out our socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or the ghost of a dead child serial killer about the show, and we hope to see you next time.